mental health, and SEL. So we're really looking forward to this event. And we're going to judge and see whether this is a good time or it would be a better time for fifth grade parents in the spring to hear it rather than once they enter middle school. I don't know what the answer is there. So we'll take a survey when it's done and we'll figure out what the best time for that program is. But similar to the PHS experience, I think it's really important for students in the middle school and their families to know all the opportunities in the middle school that's going to happen, that they can get themselves into. So, parent-teacher conferences are fast approaching, November 16, 17, and 18. And for access and equity, we are offering both options still, in-person and virtual. And sign-ups and information will be coming home in the next couple of weeks. So please be on the lookout for that. The high school counseling office, they held a federal student aid application workshop. So for the FAFSA report, and if anybody filled out a FAFSA report, it is the worst thing in the world, right? It's horrible. Anyway, so Mr. Maglione from HESA, which is the Higher Education Student Assistance Authority, he was there Saturday from 9 to 11. 45 families attended. He actually stayed an extra hour answering individual questions, and turns out we are number 10 in the state for submitted applications. So again, as these two student representatives said about our counseling office, I'm really happy with their performance. And Mr. Johnson, thank you for the compliment to me, but it's all them. Kelly Chalakos and Teresa Edmondson and the team is doing a fantastic job. So let's see. Tomorrow, also, the counseling office at the high school will be hosting Coffee with Your Counselor, and that is for ninth grade parents. In the Patton Cafe. It's sort of an informal, kind of come in and just talk with your counselors and really find out information that you may not know or may have questions to ask or things like that. So we're looking forward to that. And again, they're doing a wonderful job. So if you don't have any questions for me, I have one more short presentation from Ms. Pongratz about the HIB self-assessment scores that our schools are required to submit based on a rubric that we get at the beginning of the year or the end of last year, things like that. And so schools have to require trainings, all that material, and they grade themselves based on the things that they are able to achieve throughout the year based on the rubric that we get. I know I said a lot of words there. Sorry, colleagues.
It's great. The presentation's over. No.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Consist everybody else.
Well, you know what, you guys have it in front of you. I was gonna project it, I'll just speak to it. That's okay. I muted it. Just wanted to- Okay, you have it. Moving on. So for the self-assessment, all the schools have school safety teams. They're also known as school culture climate and school climate teams because they make a lot of acronyms, Dr. Connor's favorite. But basically these teams meet a few times a year to review the HIBs, to review the different programs and training for the year, to understand how many HIBs there are, to determine if there are any trends. If there are any kind of trends, we always share that with David Rubin, who will present that to you as well. And then we typically will present to you our scores when they're ready to be posted on the website, and that's after the state approves them. So before we go through all of that, I'm just showing you what the scores are from last year now before we give them to the state, so you are aware where we are. Just to give you a hint, a 78 is a perfect score. Our district average is 76.7. Children's Corner, just because they're new, just got started, so there's some areas they're going to work to improve on. But we didn't even realize we had to support Children's Corner with this until kind of late in the game, but they already had been doing all of these things anyway, so they're doing a great job. So basically, there's perfect scores in the category of Core Element 2, training and training on the BOE approved policy. We have perfect scores in the area of Core Element 4, other staff instruction and training. And a lot of those things are when we do assemblies for the students. For example, I meet with the PTOs and PTA presidents. We train them. The schools work with their volunteers. So all these different trainings and things get us these scores. And that's it. The schools review all of their efforts at the end of every year on this rubric, and they score themselves based on what they've done and the evidence that they have to support it. So we're really proud of what we're doing. It's very clear our schools understand thoroughly what is expected of them, and they work hard on this every year to improve their scores.
So Colleen, so 15 out of 15 would be that there was 15 something that we were ready for and we
There-
did.
For example, like in core element one, there may be 6 sections, and all 6 sections, they exceeded expectations. So they got, the highest rating of a 3
You
in
might
each of
get
those.
6 for achieving all the meetings we're supposed to, 6 points. You
Mhm.
might get 3 points for the student assemblies, right? And again, the trainings are there's a rubric based, so we know going into the year what we have to do.
We also have programs and curriculums and things that address character education, social emotional learning, and all of that counts towards our efforts.
Could you talk more about the core element 6? Like, what does
Sure.
it mean?
So anytime there's HIB as a board, you review them, every meeting. So when the school has requirements on how to report incidents, there's certain things that have to be done in certain timeframes, and our schools do that in order. If they don't have a 100% perfect score here, you have to have 0 infractions of HIB, and that's impossible because even if someone just had submitted a report because they were unsure of what happened, that's an incident of HIB, even if it's not affirmed.
Ms. Pomerantz, do you have just year over year, just to show progress on year over year metrics for these? Do you monitor those?
Yep, they're on, we monitor every year. We present that to you also in our E EVVRS report.
Right.
So we're always between 76 and 78, and typically those points are fluctuating from incidents of HIB. All the other things that we can control, like programming, training, working with our staff, working with our students, meeting deadlines, we always meet and exceed expectations.
What would happen if we did a self-assessment and we got a score of like 50? What would be the consequences? What would someone do to us?
We don't get a score of 50.
Dr. Connors, it would be.
It would be really impossible because we monitor this every month. It's part of my job to monitor it. So every month they're submitting their
I'm not
trainings
talking
and
about-
programs.
What are the consequences
It
of
would
getting
go
a
on our
bad score?
CUSAC report. Doc.
CUSAC report.
Oh, CUSAC.
Yes.
Okay. That's what I was asking.
Mhm.
Yep.
I'm like, it's an impossibility. We
Which is a
monitor.
rubric-based system as well.
All right.
CUSAC.
Got it.
So, again, the things we know and can control.
If
we
anybody
do
here
well.
can say what CUSAC stands for, you get an A, okay? Quality.
I can.
Continue,
Yeah, right.
good, quality, continue.
Quality single accountability.
There you
continuum.
go. Whatever that means.
Question, Dr. Congrats. We're talking about core element 6 and school level incident reporting. Does the standard still exist where at the building principal level, they can determine in terms of where that report's going to go, it's going to be HIB, they can downgrade it to, so how do we, does that report it, somebody like this was downgraded?
Yes,
this
that's
was-
a requirement.
Okay.
So we have a mechanism in place. If a principal feels that way, they typically call our office. We go through it with them. We haven't had any.
Right.
We're just started the year, but we haven't had any things like that.
Yeah, I was always curious, as administrators, we always want to downplay or try to push levels down. We don't really want to suspend early.
You can't, just to be clear on it, the principal does not get to decide whether they want to downgrade it or not. They have very, very limited discretion under the law and our policy. It's only if a parent makes a complaint, which on its face, if true, would not touch the elements of HIB, that they can decide not to treat it that way. They simply can't decide, well, yeah, if that's the way it happened, it would be HIB, but I know it didn't happen, or I know that they cannot, they have to put that all aside. So it's only if, on its face, if true, it wouldn't be HIB that they can do that.
Something because I work closely with the principals, I'm really proud to say, even if it doesn't fall there, they always address it, even if it's not in that report. And the principals are very patient, they work with families, and our goal, we always say this with HIB or anything else, is to educate the kids so it eliminates this from reoccurring. And those are the messages all our principals use when they're working with families. And there's always some sort of supportive mental health support after any kind of event, to make sure we're checking in with the kids and making sure these events don't repeat. Yes?
I think you may have answered my question, but, so this is self-assessment. So
Mhm.
is there like then a state like oversight, or that's CUSAC? That's CUSAC then comes in and looks at the self-assessment along all of the other like documentation. So CUSAC is the,
Right, so if we're getting a 76.7 here, but we have 75 HIBs throughout, whatever, they'll say what's wrong here.
so this is the part of, so this self-assessment is not the only
No.
accountability piece, I guess is my point.
No.
Right.
Within HIB. This is just our responsibility to monitor in-house, and then CUSAC would look at all of the documentation collectively to
Yep.
make sure that we are doing our jobs. So I think when you said CUSAC, it made sense,
Mhm.
and then that's what I just
And the
wanted
state
to-
monitors it annually, even if
Yes.
we're not CUSAC, so
Yes.
there's always a checks and balance.
Gotcha. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Any other
you.
questions? Thank you.
That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rinelli. And now we move to item 9, which is Personnel and Labor Relations. Mr. Johnson?
Be it resolved, the following motions identify as items A through F be approved as presented.
Second.
Mr. Board Secretary, will you please read the roll?
Mrs. Cordino?
Yes?
Mr. Johnson?
Yes?
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Ms. Rashid?
Yes.
Ms. Gatto?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Cherry?
Yes.
Dr. Connors?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Item 10 is committee reports, and since our last meeting, 3 committees have met: Policy and Legislative, Fiscal and Planning, and Curriculum. We'll start with Policy and Legislative, and the chairperson is Ms. Smith, so here you go.
Thank you. The Policy and Legislative Committee report is as follows. Policy and Legislative Committee met on Thursday, September the 22nd, 2022, to discuss student representatives of the Board of Education, live streaming of meetings, student ID cards, student journalism, and others. Committee approved proposed policy about the high school student representative to move forward to the Board of Education. This policy would implement recent legislation mandating at least one student representative on every school board in a district with a high school. Committee also approved changes to Policy 0168, recording, to move forward to the board. The changes add language to permit live streaming of board meetings with certain restrictions to maximize safety, and changes the title to recording and live streaming board meetings. Another legislative review was the committee approved an update to Policy 5513, care of school property, to move forward to the board to reflect changes to the related administrative code section and certain terminology. Ms. Cordino and myself expressed concern about withholding diplomas for non-payment of outstanding charges, but trusted it would not be a common practice. Committee approved proposed Policy 5517, school district issued student identification cards, to move forward to the board. The purpose of this policy is to implement recent legislation requiring that ID cards for students in grades 7 through 12 have suicide prevention contacts printed on the back. Mr. Rubin reported that ID cards are issued to students in all grades, but only middle and high school students are required to wear them. The committee approved proposed policy legislation policy 5722, student journalism, to move forward to the board. The policy is intended to replace policy 2432, school-sponsored publications, implementing recent legislation recognizing editorial freedom of student journalists. subject to certain restrictions to respect the rights of others. Mr. Rubin briefed the committee on 2 laws approved by Governor Murphy in September. The first was 2022, which requires districts to disseminate promotional information about school nutrition and available food choices in the 2 languages most commonly spoken in the students' homes in the district. And the other legislation was 2022, the Working Class Families and Anti-Hunger Act, effective September 2023, requiring districts to provide free school breakfasts and lunches to students from middle-income families. Mr. Patel asked the committee, he's a public member of the board. Mr. Patel asked the committee to consider a policy addressing advertisement banners at the football stadium to assure equity for all student groups. Mr. Rubin will gather information from the administration on the district's current practices. And that concludes my report. Our report.
Question for Mr. Rubin. In the PL 2022 C-103, it says that available food choices in 2 languages most commonly spoken in students' home and district. Is that by population of the entire student body or each individual student?
I think it talks about, as I recall, the statute talks about the 2 most commonly spoken languages in the district as a whole.
Okay,
They make an assumption, I
So that would
guess,
be
that
too hard.
that'll be
Okay.
spread across the schools evenly. I wouldn't make that assumption,
Okay,
but they do.
We have the ability to translate most things in 9 languages.
okay. Thank you.
For the policy 5513, is there language for exceptions if the family is not able to pay for any outstanding?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So I can tell you that that was part of our concern as we discussed it. And we changed again some of the language because textbooks are kind of like almost a little bit more obsolete compared to as being a one-to-one district. And that everything is with discretion, meaning, they have the ultimate, nothing is set in stone, that if you have a fine, you wouldn't get a diploma. Because
There
we had
would be
very similar
alternatives,
concerns.
Something to
I think
replace
the
that.
concept here is that the threat of doing something is often more potent than carrying it out, and the goal here is not to penalize people, it's to light a fire under people to actually get them to meet their obligations. That's the goal here.
Any other comments or questions? All right, the next committee that met was the Fiscal Planning and Operations Committee. It's the committee that I'm the chairperson of, and I would ask member of that committee, Kimberly Lane, to read the report.
Thank you, Dr. Connors. The Fiscal Planning and Operations Committee met on Wednesday, October the 5th, 2022, to discuss the budget calendar, health benefit expenses, capital projects, and more. The 2021-2022 audit. The auditors completed their field work in September, including a thorough review of federal grants. No issues are anticipated. For 2023-24 budget calendar, the committee reviewed and approved the 2023-2024 budget calendar. Health benefit expenses, Mr. Oliveira updated the committee on the poor claims performance during the first quarter and discussed several measures administration is taking to address claims costs. The committee recommended that the revised proposed NJSBA draft resolution opposing SEHBP premium increases be added to the board meeting agenda. Facility capital projects, the HVAC upgrades, number 1, the temporary HVAC units have been working well. Delivery of unit ventilator and metal shelving shipments is reported to be imminent. For HVAC upgrade number 2, the bid release date has been postponed to November the 1st. Our 5-year capital project plan, the committee discussed the plan for updating the 5-year capital project plan based on the current financial resources. For the Energy Savings Improvement Program, the acronym ESIP, solar PPA. Cable limiters were received for Eisenhower and King. The contractor is exploring alternative solutions for Arbor. The Quibbletown modified solar proposal is expected soon. For the Honeywell projects, LED lighting work is occurring at Fellowship Farm. Work on the boilers, destratification fans, water conservation measures, and transformers are all ongoing. For transportation, staffing remains a challenge. However, all regular routes and athletics activity runs are being covered. The district was able to reinstate the middle school late bus to increase participation in after-school activities. The district continues to recruit bus drivers and aides. And Mr. Oliveira, I know specifically regarding that point there, I want to extend thanks and kudos to those team members in transportation who are pulling double and triple duty, making sure that, they're octopi with many arms that are, covering not only the phones, but also covering aid duty, covering driving the bus. They're a very well-rounded group, and we certainly appreciate them stepping in to help close those gaps while we're seeking and recruiting new members for that team. So please.
I called the transportation office today, and I think it was the first day since school started that the supervisor was in the office and not driving a bus.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, that's
a testament.
So that was good. The supervisor, the dispatcher have been driving regularly just to make sure everything's covered, and the secretary's been an aide regularly, leaving only one person in the transportation office, but they've been doing a great job.
Yeah, and that's a testament to the flexibility, obviously you need to be licensed and, the gravity of that. So if there are people from the public who are calling who may not be getting a response, do know that it's not for the lack of them trying. It's just making sure that their boots on the ground, wheels are rolling, and, the kids are getting picked up, the students are getting picked up and taken to their locations, hopefully on time and safely. But those calls and those needs will be addressed from an administrative, office end part of their day-to-day operations. So thank you there. And just to sum up for food services update, as we heard from our student representatives, great food feedback from them. School nutrition applications, this is important. A reminder email and telephone message to complete this year's application was sent out to parents on October the 2nd. Reminder messages have been added to the school marquees at the schools and have assisted with targeted outreach. Our current free and reduced student eligibility rate is 30% of enrollment. And Mr. Oliveira, that deadline is tomorrow, am I correct?
Correct.
October 14th. So the final push is on. And I expect, are there any extensions to that date, or that's a drop dead date?
No, that's the date for reporting purposes. Obviously, any family can fill out an application at any time during the year, so they could fill it out on October 17th, next Monday, just for our state reporting purposes. Tomorrow's the cutoff. And certainly any family that at any point during the year your financial situation changes, we would encourage you to fill out the application and immediately make yourself eligible if you have an unfortunate circumstance where you would in fact be eligible.
Thank you. Two final points, student feedback meetings. The first PHS student meeting was held on September the 29th. Feedback was positive, and we continue to hear that regarding the food quality, food variety, and menu messaging. And the food service equipment, new refrigerators were received at Arbor, King, and Quibbletown, and 2 combo ovens were received at PHS, thus lending to the very tasty
Well, we got
fries.
great fries.
So that concludes my report.
Thank you.
Our
Any
report.
questions or comments?
Just a question where you talked about the poor claims performance. Does that mean that they're not being reimbursed, the cost of the claims is very high? I was unclear on the verbiage.
Yeah, so we're self-insured. So what that means is that we pay all the medical bills directly. So if there's a lot of medical activity, we're paying it directly. And so that's what that's alluding to.
So when you're saying poor claims, that means there are many claims that you are paying.
Poor means I'm the financial guy. So
I
if
got
it's
you.
costing